Whew. The next item of business is portfolio questions, and the portfolio questions this afternoon are on economy, fair work and culture. Question number 1, Oliver Mundell, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it's taking to accelerate projects that will support the economic recovery in Dumfriesshire.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
We are investing £85 million in the Borderlands deal to support projects that will accelerate economic growth across Dumfries and Galloway, and I'm pleased that the UK Government has finally agreed to match our pledge to fund the Borderlands deal over a 10-year period. We have also established the South of Scotland Enterprise to accelerate economic growth in Dumfriesshire and across the South, backed by an operating budget of £27.3 million and committed over £3.1 million to the Dumfriesshire area, specifically for projects supported through the South of Scotland Economic Partnership, and we are continuing to work with local partners to progress all projects as swiftly as possible.
Oliver Mundell.
I really appreciate that answer from the Cabinet Secretary, and I wonder, in terms of Borderlands, if she will make sure that projects such as Chapel Cross in my constituency and the Dairy Research Hub at the Barony campus are prioritised, and also if she'll impress upon Cabinet colleagues that improving connectivity, particularly in terms of the A75 and a number of new stations, would be really important in terms of making sure the region's economy grows.
Cabinet Secretary.
The members clearly identified a number of areas and they're all being looked at in different ways and by my colleagues, and I'm sure they can update him when they have the position to do so. In relation to the Chapel Cross Borderlands project, I understand that a business case was being requested by local partners to ensure that there was a clear strategic vision and industry buy-in necessary to secure the private sector investment required to ensure the site's long-term sustainability, because clearly the Borderlands investment is predicated, yes, on investments by the UK and the Scottish Government, but also led locally, but with a particular eye that it generates additionality in terms of private investment. That initial outline business case was received, I think, in late November, and it's being looked at just now.
Supplementary, Willie Coffey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's important that our economic recovery is also a green recovery. Could the Cabinet Secretary provide an update on the steps being taken to ensure that Scottish Government investment delivers environmental returns?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly, having a green recovery is part of that focus. It was the advice from the Advisory Group on Economic Recovery. In terms of what was set out in our programme for government, we're investing in our Green New Deal. This includes a groundbreaking £1.6 billion to transform how we heat our homes, £60 million to help decarbonise industry, and £100 million for Green Jobs Fund. And our updated climate change plan announced another £400 million of low carbon fund commitments, and will continue to drive a green recovery through infrastructure, through the infrastructure investment plan, and that will lay out different opportunities and plans to boost inclusive growth, build sustainable places and tackle the climate and nature crisis.
Question 2, Alistair Allen.
To ask the Scottish Government for an update on BIFAB.
Cabinet Secretary.
Will be aware that I gave evidence to the Economy, Energy and Fair Work Committee on Tuesday, the 15th of December, and I made a statement on BIFAB in the Chamber on Wednesday, the 16th of December. Deloitte were appointed as administrators on Monday, the 14th of December. I've agreed to fund them in the short term if there is insufficient funds in the business to do so, to remove the immediate threat of redundancies while a sale of business process is pursued. And I would encourage all interested parties who share our objectives of a strong future for the workforce in the sites to make contact with the administrator.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her reply and for her helpful update given to Parliament yesterday. As you will be aware, for the communities I represent, the jobs are more important than the identity of the company. It is the jobs, from my point of view, that are brought into Arnish that matter. In seeking to be open to other potential uses for the yard, is the Scottish Government considering the potential for leasing arrangements that might enable multiple companies to use the yard?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly that is an issue for the administration in the first instance, but we are making sure that they are aware of the different proposals and ideas and indeed the local aspects, whether it's in Fife or indeed particularly in the constituency of the member with the Arnish site. And we also agree with Highlands and Islands Enterprise that a truly successful outcome for Arnish must support year-round economic activity, and we're also making it clear to the BIFAB administrator that the priority is sustainable long-term employment that can balance that peaks and troughs, and we want prospective tenants, whether that means one company or, as suggested by the member, multiple, to demonstrate the ability to provide a pipeline of activity. And we recognise that the wider Arnish point itself in the development is a strategic asset to the Highlands and Islands, as well as making sure use of the existing fabrication shops. We'd also want to make sure there was benefit for future tenants from them who can form a complementary part of the emerging blue economy cluster on the wider site. And we're also mindful of the wide range of economic opportunities that the Stornoway deep water terminal, the £49 million package, which was announced by the Cabinet Secretary for Rural Economy last week, can play, and are keen that the Arnish Yard can benefit from that investment as well.
Supplementary, Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, the Cabinet Secretary said that the chances of the NNG contract coming to Scotland are receding. Can I ask what the Government can do to support Saipem in awarding the NNG contract to the Fife Yards? Or does she actually believe that time has run out for these jobs that were promised to Fife?
Cabinet Secretary.
I certainly do not, and I do think that the opportunity for the NNG to be delivered in Scotland is there. It's not in my gift. It is the decision of Saipem, and they'll be looking at competitive tendering. Can I also remark and pay tribute to EDF, who were encouraging of the LNG project, or at least even a very small part of it, to be produced in Scotland. And if there is a company that can deliver under an agreement with whoever takes over the yard, or indeed if they themselves are a company that can take over the yard, there's still the possibility of doing it. But I think we should manage expectations that it is a challenge. But it's why on a number of occasions I've impressed on Saipem our belief that it can and should be developed. And there is a self-interest, particularly with more procurement, particularly going to be required to be delivered by supply chains in Scotland in the future, with ScotWind and with the statement of procurement principles that we've established. And hopefully, as I set out yes on Tuesday and yes again yesterday, that if the UK's contract for difference can change, then I think that also provides the impetus and the incentive for companies, including Saipem, and indeed other developers to deliver work for that in that yard. That is one of the, I think, the levers that would be in the self-interest of Saipem and indeed other players to deliver the LNG contract. But we've got to be realistic that it will be a challenge.
Question 3, Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what financial support is available for newly self-employed people who have not been able to access other forms of support during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm obviously very aware of the concern about those that have had difficulties in accessing financial support, particularly the newly self-employed. That's a group for whom the financial challenges are particularly acute, particularly because they are excluded from support from the UK Government's Self-Employment Income Support Scheme. In recognition of that, we acted swiftly to support the newly self-employed back in April by introducing the newly self-employed hardship fund. That provided £2,000 of grants to over 5,500 people. In response to the ongoing disruption caused by COVID-19 restrictions, we've also committed to an additional £15 million to run a second round of the newly self-employed hardship fund, building on the first iteration, and it will also provide a further £2,000 grant. And we're working closely with local authorities to deliver the second round of the newly self-employed hardship fund, and further details will be made available in the coming days.
Fulton McGregor.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response, and I very much welcome the additional discretionary funding that has been put in place. And because of the UK Government's action, as the Cabinet Secretary refers to, some constituents who have contacted me have had next to no financial support since this pandemic started, and this includes taxi drivers. Can I ask when the Government expects that people will be able to apply for and have access to the discretionary funding? And I wonder if you could clarify, will taxi drivers be able to apply for this funding, or will they only have access to the separate funding stream? Thanks.
Cabinet Secretary.
Okay, so originally the discretionary fund that has been made available to local authorities was seen as a possible source of funding for taxi drivers. Since then, we've identified an additional £90 million specifically for taxi and private hire vehicle drivers. This fund will be available in January. And of course, the focus of the local authorities is specifically in those who have had no additional financial support. And obviously, some taxi drivers will be able to be either benefit from the furlough scheme if they're employed, or indeed the self-employed scheme, but we're very cognizant of the fixed cost issues faced by taxi drivers, and that is why an additional funding of £19 million has been identified to support them.
Question for Ruth Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what steps it's taking to engage with business stakeholders to inform its response to the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Minister Jamie Hepburn.
Ministers have engaged extensively with business leaders, businesses and their representative organisations on the response to the COVID emergency and its impact on the economy. Ministers have engaged with businesses or their representative organisations on more than 780 occasions since the beginning of March 2020. This includes engagement with the main business organisations such as the CBI, FSB, IOD, Scottish Chambers of Commerce, SCDI, Scottish Financial Enterprise, Scottish Retail Consortium, Scottish Tourism Alliance, Scottish Food and Drink and a range of other industry groups. We continue to engage with and work with businesses to respond to the COVID emergency and its impact on the economy.
Minister, please. Sorry, you've just spoken. Yes, I was distracted for a moment there. Who am I back to? I'm back to Ruth Maguire. Sorry, Ms Maguire.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the Minister for that answer. Like many parts of our economy, the manufacturing sector has been hit hard by the pandemic. Can the Minister provide an update as to the steps the Scottish Government is taking with stakeholders as it works to secure a sustainable future for the sector?
Minister.
Well, let me acknowledge that clearly, in common with many sectors, this has been a very difficult time for the manufacturing sector in Scotland. We've worked very closely with them and with their workforce to make sure that they could safely operate throughout the pandemic period. In terms of recovery, the Scottish Government published Making Scotland's Future, a recovery plan for manufacturing for consultation the 4th of December. The draft plan has been developed again in partnership with representatives from industry and trade unions and the public sector and academia, and its launch creates the opportunity for wider stakeholder inputs. I would encourage Ms Maguire and others with an interest to take part in that consultation.
Question 5, Monica Lynn.
Presiding Officer, and I refer to my register of interest as a member of GMB Union to ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the GMB Scotland campaign, Give Key Workers a Break.
Minister.
Our shop workers have done a fantastic job in very difficult times throughout the COVID pandemic. They should rightly be recognised by us all in that regard, and of course by their employers. Employers should suitably recognise and reward staff for their efforts throughout this most difficult year, and the Scottish Government would encourage them to do so. We are sympathetic to the GMB campaign, and I would urge retailers to give consideration to the necessity of opening on Boxing Day and New Year's Day. And I have also written to all party spokespeople to see if we can reach a united position on this, and I'll also be meeting with the Scottish Retail Consortium on Monday.
Monica Lennon.
I'm grateful to the Minister for his response, and I do welcome that ASDA has responded positively to the campaign and will give workers a day off on Boxing Day, although it's of course disappointing they'll have to use their own annual leave to do so. Last week, in response to my colleague Neil Bibby, the First Minister said she would look at the request to use powers under the Christmas Day and New Year's Day Trading Scotland Act 2007 to give key workers in supermarkets and large shops the day off on New Year's Day. Can the Minister provide an update on whether the Scottish Government will go ahead with this and give key workers a much-deserved day off? And can he comment on the Government's position in relation to other large supermarkets and shops who have not followed ASDA's lead? Will the Government be saying more about this?
Minister.
Well, certainly on the last point, hopefully Ms Lennon heard what I had to say in response to my first question. I would urge retailers to look very closely at the necessity of opening on those days, and particularly in the light of the impact this year has had on their workforce. In relation to the specific proposition around utilising the Christmas Day and New Year's Day trading Act 2007. This is a matter I spoke with Mr Bibby and the GMB about last week, and indeed I just corresponded with the Public Petitions Committee on this morning. Utilising that Act would be difficult. I have to be candid about that. There is not only a requirement for consultation before the laying of any order to put in effect such a closure on New Year's Day. There is also the necessity to publish an economic impact assessment, to publish an assessment on family life, and also itself the order has to lay before Parliament for a minimum of 40 days. So hopefully Ms Lennon can see the difficulties involved in utilising that particular piece of legislation. But of course what I have done, and again as I set out in my initial answer, is I'm seeking to speak with all parties to see if we can establish a way forward.
Question 6, James Kelly.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to support businesses that are struggling to operate during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Minister.
Since the start of the crisis, we have invested over £2.3 billion to support businesses across Scotland. We have allocated a further £570 million support for business and the wider economy, which includes funding for the Strategic Framework Business Fund and the recently announced £185 million targeted support to help impacted businesses and sectors through winter. The range of business help and support available can be found at the Find Business Support website.
James Kelly.
Thank the Minister for that response. The reality is that the hospitality industry in Glasgow is on its knees suffering from the impact of the pandemic. Some businesses haven't opened since March. The reality is jobs will be lost, businesses will close. So can I ask the Minister what direct discussions have taken place with representatives of the hospitality industry in order to provide support and examine the limited lifting of some restrictions in order to avoid a wholesale loss of jobs?
Minister.
Well, I don't know if Mr Kelly was listening to my answer to Ruth Maguire, but I was able to set out that ministers have engaged with business organisations on over 780 occasions since March 2020. I can quite assure Mr Kelly that a significant amount of that endeavour and activity has been in relation to dialogue with hospitality industry, in particular myself and my colleague Fergus Ewing as the Minister for Tourism have led on much of those discussions. We are very cognisant of the challenges that the sector faces right now. We'll continue to meet with the sector to discuss what more can be done. But of course, as was announced just last week, there is some additional support being deployed to support that sector, and we'll continue to look and see what more we can do as we move our way through this pandemic.
Supplementary, Maurice Golden, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Information released on support grant applications that closed back in July show 15,000 applications are still outstanding. If that is the scale of the backlog, does the Minister have confidence local authorities will be able to cope with distributing the new support schemes recently announced in order to save businesses who are struggling to survive?
Minister, did you manage to hear that?
Yes, I did. Indeed, I did, and yes, I do.
You obviously heard it. Number 7's not been lodged. Number 8, Keith Brown, please.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it's had with the supermarket sector regarding the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Minister.
Scottish ministers and Scottish Government officials have engaged regularly with supermarkets and other food retailers on a range of issues throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. In particular, we work closely with them to ensure continuity of supply to Scotland's islands and to provide priority delivery slots to people who were shielding during the lockdown. Food Standards Scotland has produced guidance for all food businesses, including retailers, that supports risk assessment and risk management to help them operate safely. This includes a self-assessment tool for food businesses to use to ensure implementation of COVID-19 safety measures continues to be effective. During the Christmas shopping period, stores will be markedly busier, so it's vitally important to ensure the safety of both staff and customers that existing measures are followed.
Keith Brown.
Can I thank the Minister for his answer? Does he expect that the Scottish Government will have any further information they can pass on in relation to how much it expects to have returned from supermarkets in Scotland who have decided not to accept the rates relief that was put in place as part of the package of support for the retail sector of the economy during the pandemic? An initiative which I think I first heard from a colleague, Shona Robertson. And does the Minister agree with me that this money represents an opportunity to provide even greater support to businesses in my constituency and across Scotland who have been hit so hard by the ongoing pandemic?
Minister.
Well, I think in the first instance we should rightly commend those supermarkets who have committed to reimburse the public finances for the support they received through rates relief. Every penny returned to us will be invested in our recovery from COVID-19 and will be used to support those who have been hardest hit by the pandemic. In relation to what we estimate the value of the funding to Scotland being, it could be, we think, in the region of £200 million. The Finance Secretary has written to the Treasury seeking urgent clarity on how those monies from retailers will be made available. We are very clear that any revenues voluntarily paid by ratepayers in Scotland should remain in Scotland and not be withheld by the UK Government.
Thank you. That concludes portfolio questions, and it's time to move on to the next item of business. Before I do so,